What's going on, guys? Thomas McNamara here, reading from the book Letters and Numbers. Chapter 13, we're on page 229. We're reading the 8 presidents to die in office. The ones that are just, accidentally line up with the Gematria. Not that anybody uses this code. So, we got through a few of them. The thing is, I have a suspicion that he's going to end this saying something about Donald Trump that may be a forecast of the future, you know? But first he talks about the assassination attempt of Richard Lawrence. He was the assassinator, you know? We got arsenic. Remember, arsenic's 33, arsenic poisoning is 187, Federal Reserve 143, Scottish Rite of Freemasonry also 143. The Federal Reserve is also 235, 23.5 degrees, like the 47 degrees of the Freemason logo, the compass. May 23rd or 23.5, the 143rd day of the year. We got the first one was death of William Henry Harrison. It's interesting, Wikipedia doesn't even mention him as a death rumored to be an assassination. It only mentions Zachary Taylor and Warren G. Harding. It doesn't mention this guy, the first one, the first president to die in office. He was the 9th president. On April 4th, like 44, 1841. He was in the Whig Party, 47 in the ordinal, just like Democrat and Republican. Blood sacrifice is 67. 4 plus 4 plus 18 plus 41, the date he died. April 4th, 1841, was 67. He's replaced by John Tyler, who's 44. And then we get the first one, death of Zachary Taylor on July 9th, 1850. 9 years after the 9th president, Zachary Taylor would become the next to die in office. Zachary Taylor. And then the 13th president, Millard Fillmore, would replace Zachary Taylor the day of his passing. Interestingly, the name Fillmore, or Millard, has satanic gematria of 314, not unlike pi, and 3.14, the result of dividing the number 22 by 7. We got the death of Abraham Lincoln, and he connects all of the. We got Honest Abe, Abraham Lincoln. He connects the JFK with Abraham Lincoln, one of this one guy's many accidents. You know, just happened to be coincidences there, where both were shot in the head. Lincoln's secretary Kennedy warned him not to go to Ford's Theater. Kennedy's secretary Lincoln warned him not to go to Dallas. They were Southerners assassinated both, and Southern vice presidents named Johnson succeeded both. Andrew Johnson would become 17th president 107 days after his 56th birthday, where president is 56 in a single reduction. Andrew is 65 in ordinal. Andrew Johnson is 65 in reverse reduction. He would become president in 65. Andrew Johnson succeeded Lincoln, was born in 1808. Lyndon Johnson, who succeeded Kennedy, was born in 1908. John Wilkes Booth was born in 1839, who was Lincoln's credited assassin, and Lee Harvey Oswald was born in 1939, who was Kennedy's credited assassin. On the subject of the number 39, recall that Masonry and secrecy both equate to 39 in reverse reduction. As we know, JFK was killed in the middle of Dealey Plaza, named after a Scottish Rite Freemason, and Lincoln was killed in Ford's Theater, where the gematria of the structure corresponds with Freemasonry, as covered, equating to 58. That becomes all the more intriguing when you realize the play Lincoln was watching was called Our American Cousin, which debuted October 15th, 1858 in New York, emphasis on 58, exactly 339 weeks before Lincoln's assassination, where the number 339 corresponds with the United States of America. Don't overlook the number 39 that can be found within 339. As for the debut in New York City, the land of the 39-story United Nations building, it is a city that is very much centered on that specific number, coming from the 39 books of the Old Testament, which I'll teach you more about in the chapter on sports rigging, where the number 39 always comes up huge and where every New York Super Bowl one has been centered on it. Specifically, plus more. For now, here's a list to know and memorize. It puts any chance of coincidence to bed. At the same time, keep in mind George Clinton, born July 26, 1739, was the first governor of New York. And New York was established July 26, 1788. New York is 39 in reduction. July 26, 1788, the date New York was founded, equates to 39 when 7 plus 2 plus 6 plus 1 plus 7 plus 8 plus 8. NY is 39 in ordinal. NYC is 39 in reverse ordinal. Empire is 39 in reduction. George is 39 in reduction. And Clinton is 39 in reverse reduction. As for the October 15th release of the play, that is the day leaving 77 days left in the year. Recall how the number connects to theater in ordinal gematria, as well as the coordinates of the theater on the 77th meridian west in the G spots. Even better, the name of the main character in the play, Asa Trenchard, has reverse reduction gematria of 77 too. If you read about the play, Asa is said to be an honest and humble man, too gullible for his own good. 77 in reverse reduction for its theater, 77 in a single reverse reduction. If you do a little more decoding, which I'll save some fun for you, you'll notice the name Asa Trenchard and theater overlap with gematria of 77 and 112, using the base ciphers. Coincidence? Ha! Speaking of coincidence theorists, I recommend you read the article written by Snopes.com about how the comparison between the deaths of JFK and Lincoln, which we are now uncovering, are all coincidence. No doubt the article was written by one of the long noses that grew at least a few centimeters longer upon publishing. Now let us continue with the same list. So here it is, Snopes. Fact check, Lincoln and Kennedy. Lincoln and Kennedy coincidences. Numerous coincidences between the Lincoln and... See how they even quoted in there? They emphasize coincidences between the Lincoln and Kennedy assassinations are not really so amazing. That's what they say. The claim list describes a number of amazing coincidences that can be found between the assassinations of Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy. The origin: not long after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963, the A-list of seemingly amazing coincidences between the two men's lives appeared, and it has been widely and continuously reprinted and circulated ever since. My brother's sending me pictures. So Abraham Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846. John F. Kennedy was elected to Congress in 1946. Abraham Lincoln was elected president in 1860. John F. Kennedy was elected president in 1960. The names Lincoln and Kennedy each contained 7 letters. Both were particularly concerned with civil rights. Both wives lost their children while living in the White House. I'm thinking maybe the next president that's going to be assassinated is going to be elected in 2060, and they're going to be elected to Congress in 2046. The names Lincoln and Kennedy each contain 7 letters. Both were particularly concerned with civil rights. Both wives lost their children while living in the White House. Both presidents were shot on a Friday. Both were shot in the head. Lincoln's Secretary Kennedy warned him not to go to the theater. Kennedy's Secretary Lincoln warned him not to go to Dallas. Both were assassinated by Southerners. Both were succeeded by Southerners. Both successors were named Johnson. Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Lincoln, was born in 1808. Lyndon Johnson, who succeeded Kennedy, was born in 1908. John Wilkes Booth was born in 1839. Lee Harvey Oswald was born in 1939. Both assassins were known by their 3 names. Both names are comprised of 15 letters. Booth ran from the theater and was caught in a warehouse. Oswald ran from a warehouse and was caught in the theater. Both Booth and Oswald were assassinated before their trials. Despite the seemingly impressive surface appearance, several of these entries are either misleading or factually incorrect, and the rest are mostly mere superficial coincidences that fail to touch upon the much more substantial differences and dissimilarities that underlie them. Let's examine them one at a time. Abraham Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846. John F. Kennedy was elected to Congress in 1946. First of all, we have to note, in regard to this and subsequent entries, that two similar events taking place 100 years apart is no more of an amazing coincidence than if those events had occurred 92 or 105 years apart. It's only something we take note of and think special because of our non-logical fascination with round numbers. In this particular case, the statement is literally true as worded. Both Lincoln and Kennedy were first elected to Congress 100 years apart. Aside from that minor similarity, however, their political careers bore little resemblance to each other. Lincoln was an Illinois state legislator who, outside of his election to a single term in the U.S. House of Representatives, failed in his every attempt to gain national political office until he was elected president in 1860, including an unsuccessful bid for the Senate in 1854, an unsuccessful bid to become the Republican vice presidential candidate in 1856, and another unsuccessful bid for Senate seat in 1858. Kennedy, on the other hand, enjoyed an unbroken string of political successes at the national level when he entered the political arena after World War II. He was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 1946, re-elected to the House in 1948, re-elected again in 1950, won a U.S. Senate seat in 1952, was re-elected to the Senate in 1958, and was elected president in 1960. So very different people, very different. But just because of our fascination with round numbers, it makes it seem like an amazing coincidence. Abraham Lincoln was elected president in 1860. John F. Kennedy was elected president in 1960. It's hardly surprising that two men who, as noted above, both achieved their first political successes at the national level 100 years apart, would also ascend to the presidency 100 years apart. This coincidence is even less surprising when we consider that presidential elections are held only once every 4 years. Lincoln couldn't possibly have been elected president in 1857, or 1858, or 1859, or 1861, or 62, or 63, because no presidential elections were held in those years. Likewise, Kennedy couldn't possibly have been elected president in the non-election years of 57, 58, 59, 61, 62, 63. So even though both men were politically active at the national level during 8-year spans, when they might have been elected president, circumstances dictated that the only years during those spans when they both could have been elected were exactly 100 years apart. We're also supposed to be amazed at minor happenstances, such as the two men being elected exactly 100 years. Minor happenstances, such as the two men being elected exactly 100 years apart. But we're supposed to think nothing of the numerous non-coincidences. Lincoln was born in 1809. Kennedy was born in 1917. Lincoln died in 1865. Kennedy died in 1963. Lincoln was 56 years old at the time of his death. Kennedy was 46 years old when he died. Lincoln was shot in April. Kennedy was assassinated in November. Lincoln was killed on the 14th day of the month. Kennedy on the 22nd. Also unmentioned is the fact that Lincoln was re-elected to his second term as president, but Kennedy was killed before the completion of his first term. No striking coincidences or convenient 100-year spans in any of those facts. So many unmentioned things, right? There's no striking coincidences there, or convenient 100-year spans in any of those facts. The names Lincoln and Kennedy each contain 7 letters. Surely this is the most trivial of coincidences, especially when one considers that the average length of presidential surnames is 6.64 letters. Interesting they say that. The average length of presidential surnames is 6.64 letters, huh? No mention is made of the fact that the two men's first names contain different numbers of letters, and that Kennedy had a middle name, Fitzgerald, while Lincoln had none. Both were particularly concerned with civil rights. Saying that Lincoln and Kennedy were both particularly concerned with civil rights is like saying that Woodrow Wilson and Franklin Roosevelt were both particularly concerned with war, or that Herbert Hoover and Ronald Reagan were both particularly concerned with economics. Those weren't subjects these men had evinced a particular overarching interest in. Those were issues they were forced to deal with due to events currently taking place in the U.S., which were beyond their control. Both wives lost their children while living in the White House. Another statement that, while literally true, encompasses evidence that were completely different in circumstances and nature. All of Lincoln's children were born before he entered the White House, and the Lincolns actually lost 2 children, not just one, although only one died during Lincoln's tenure as president. Edward Lincoln died of tuberculosis in 1850, just before his 4th birthday, and the Lincoln's 11th-year-old son Willie succumbed to typhoid at the end of their first year in the White House. JFK and his wife, on the other hand, were the rare presidential couple still young enough to be bearing children after entering the White House, and a premature child born to Mrs. Kennedy in 1963 died 2 years later. Other substantial differences not mentioned. The Lincolns had 4 children, all boys, only one of whom lived past his teens. JFK and his wife had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, 2 of whom survived well into adulthood. Both presidents were shot on a Friday. Another non-surprise, absent all other factors, the odds were already an unremarkable 1 in 7 that both killings would have occurred on the same day of the week. No, the odds are not 1 in 49. That's a common mistake made by statistical novices. What? Why would it be 1 in 49? Yeah, 1 in 7. Of course it is. Statistical novices. Both were shot in the head. The coincidence is another one. Maybe they said that the first time, and then now they're calling themselves statistical novices. The coincidence is another one which is exceedingly trivial in nature. So the only 2 types of shots which reasonably assure a dead victim are chest shots and head shots. So 2 assassinations committed by headshots aren't the least bit coincidental, especially when one considers that since both Lincoln and Kennedy were shot from behind, and while seated, their assassins had no other practical choice of targets. And the coincidence here is even less surprising when we note the substantial differences. Lincoln was killed indoors with a small handgun at point-blank range. Kennedy was shot outdoors with a rifle from several hundred feet away. Lincoln's secretary, Kennedy, warned him not to go to Ford's Theater. Kennedy's secretary, Lincoln, warned him not to go to Dallas. This is one of those coincidences that isn't a coincidence at all. It's simply wrong. John Kennedy did have a secretary named Evelyn Lincoln, who may or may not have warned him about going to Dallas. But one searches in vain to find a Lincoln secretary named Kennedy. Lincoln's White House secretaries were John G. Nicolay and John Hay. The more important point is that since presidents are frequent recipients of assassination threats, they rarely make any public appearances without somebody's warning them of potential danger. Only on the extremely rare occasions when a tragedy actually occurs do we later note of the warnings. In all other cases, the failed prophecies are quickly forgotten. Lincoln received an unusual number of letters about plots to kidnap or assassinate him, said to have numbered at least 80, yet none of those plots were enacted. Nor does anyone think to mention other attempts at kidnap or assassination that were not preceded by any recorded warnings to the victims. Lincoln was shot at on at least one other occasion. Yes, Lincoln was warned not to go to Ford's Theater by persons concerned for his safety, just as he had been warned not to visit Richmond a week earlier, and just as he had been warned not to attend his own inauguration in 1861. Obviously, only one of the myriad of warnings he received throughout his 4 years in office was on the mark. Likewise, Kennedy was warned not to visit San Antonio the day before his trip to Dallas, and undoubtedly before a host of other appearances as well. But only the last warning he allegedly received is considered significant, because it coincidentally happens to come true. As various psychics have demonstrated, if you make enough predictions, one of them is eventually bound to come true. The public remembers only that and forgets about all the other failed predictions. Both were assassinated by Southerners. A dubious use of the term Southerner, John Wilkes Booth was undeniably a Southern sympathizer, but he was born in Maryland, which, along with Delaware, was the northernmost of the border slave states and remained part of the Union throughout the Civil War. Additionally, Booth spent a good deal of his life in the North and thought of himself as a Northerner who understood the South. Oswald was nominally a Southerner by virtue of his having been born in New Orleans. He spent his youth being shuttled between Louisiana, Texas, and New York before finally joining the Marines. But Oswald's southernness is of no real import because, unlike Booth, Oswald was not motivated by a regional affiliation. Both were succeeded by Southerners. Both Lincoln and Kennedy were succeeded by Southerners because both had Southerners as vice presidents, another fact hardly surprising considering the historical circumstances of their times. Lincoln was a Northern Republican running for re-election while the country was in the midst of a civil war and needed a Southerner and a Democrat to balance the tickets, hence his choice of Tennessean Andrew Johnson. Kennedy represented New England and therefore needed a vice presidential candidate who could appeal to the populous Southerner and Western regions, hence his choice of a Southwesterner, Texan Lyndon Johnson. The identification of Andrew Johnson as a Southerner is also a bit problematic here. Although Johnson was born in North Carolina and spent his adult life in Tennessee, both slave states, Johnson was also the only Southern senator who refused to follow his state when it seceded and remained loyal to the Union. Both successors were named Johnson. Given the high frequency of Johnson, literally son of John, as a surname in both Lincoln's and Kennedy's time, this coincidence should be no real surprise to anyone. Andrew Johnson, who succeeded Lincoln, was born in 1808. Lyndon Johnson, who succeeded Kennedy, was born in 1908. Another 100-year coincidence that is hardly surprising, since nearly all American politicians have attained high office, president or vice president, while in the 50 to 70 age range, and Andrew Johnson and Lyndon Johnson were, obviously, contemporaries of Lincoln and Kennedy, respectively. It's time again to point out that there's nothing coincidental about events merely because they somehow involve the number 100. If we sifted through all of the Lincoln-Kennedy data, we could produce multiple instances of events involving the number 17 or 49 or 116, but nobody would consider those coincidences because they don't yield nice round numbers that have any significance to us, even though they're all just as coincidental as the number 100. Definitely some numbers like 17, 49, or 116, some numbers like 44, like 47, they have some significance to some people, and it should to all of us, right? And once again, let's consider all the differences between the two Johnsons, such as that one hailed from North Carolina, while the other was from Texas. Or that one supported slavery while the other championed civil rights, or that one was never elected president in his own right, while the other won the biggest presidential landslide in history. One supported slavery? You're saying JFK supported slavery? Is that what he's trying to say? Whatever, man. Or that one was never elected president in his own right, or that one was impeached while the other wasn't, or that one became president at the end of a war while the other became president at the beginning of a war. John Wilkes Booth was born in 1839. Lee Harvey Oswald was born in 1939. Another coincidence that is no coincidence because it's plain wrong. Booth was born in 1838, not 1839. His birthday is typically fudged by a year to make it fit a predetermined pattern. Both assassins were known by their three names. Another coincidence of dubious veracity. John Wilkes Booth was often billed as J. Wilkes Booth, or simply John Wilkes, primarily to distinguish himself from his father and brother, both named Junius, and his brother Edwin, all three of whom were also actors. And as a prominent actor, his name was already familiar to the general public at the time of Lincoln's assassination. Lee Oswald was generally referred to as simply as Lee, not Lee Harvey, before Kennedy's assassination, and he was completely unknown to the general public until his arrest. The common usage of his full name only came about after the assassination, because his habitual employment of false names, including several variations on his real name, and his possession of forged identification cards, made it difficult for the Dallas police to initially identify him, so they used his full name for specificity. Both names are comprised of 15 letters. Coincidence? Neither their first nor last names have the same number of letters, and why should it be significant that both assassins had the same number of letters in their full names, when the same wasn't true of Abraham Lincoln and John Fitzgerald Kennedy, or of Andrew Johnson and Lyndon Baines Johnson? Once again, perhaps we should focus on the substantive differences between the two men. Booth was born into a prominent family and, like his father, was a well-known popular gregarious actor. Oswald was born and lived most of his life in near poverty-level circumstances, never knew his father, who died 2 months before Oswald was born, and was an obscure, moody malcontent who never had any close friends or a steady job. Oswald was married with 2 children. Booth had neither wife nor offspring. Oswald enlisted in the Marines, but Booth kept a promise to his mother not to join the Confederate Army. Booth ran from the theater and was caught in a warehouse. Oswald ran from a warehouse and was caught in a theater. Another coincidence that is both inaccurate and superficial. Booth shot Lincoln in a theater of the type where live stage shows are held, then fled across state lines before being trapped and killed in a tobacco shed several days later. Oswald shot Kennedy from not in a textbook warehouse, then remained in Dallas and was shot and taken alive in a movie theater a little over an hour later. Booth and Oswald were assassinated before their trials. Another superficial similarity with much more significant underlying differences, and a potentially dubious use of the word assassinated. After Booth shot Lincoln, he fled the scene and eventually, with a co-conspirator David Harold, crossed the Potomac River from Maryland into Virginia, eluding capture for a total of 11 days before federal troops finally discovered him to be hiding on a farm belonging to Richard Garrett and surrounded the barn in which he and Harold were sleeping. The two men were ordered to surrender. Harold complied, but when Booth failed to drop his weapon and come out, the barn was set ablaze. A trooper named Boston Corbett, who was watching Booth through a gap in the barn's siding, shot the assassin. Whether Corbett can be said to have assassinated Booth is problematic. The deeply religious Corbett sometimes claimed that he had shot Booth because Providence directed him to do it, or because he did not want Booth to be roasted alive. But he also testified that he shot Booth because he saw Booth in the act of stooping or springing and concluded he was going to use his weapons. Oswald left the warehouse from which he shot Kennedy and was arrested in a movie theater a little over an hour later by police officers. So he says that it was not a textbook warehouse, and now he's saying that it is a warehouse, huh? Oswald left the warehouse from which he shot Kennedy and was arrested in a movie theater a little over an hour later by police officers who had no idea who he was. Oswald was initially arrested only for the murder of Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit, whom he shot while in flight. His connection to the Kennedy assassination was not established until later. Oswald was captured alive and remained in custody for 2 days before being gunned down by Jack Ruby, a private citizen. Other differences. Booth was shot in the back and the neck and lived for another 3 hours. Oswald was shot in the abdomen and died within minutes of his arrival at Parkland Hospital. Parkland, like Parkland, Florida, huh? A month before Lincoln was assassinated, he was in Monroe, Maryland. A month before Kennedy was assassinated, he was in Maryland, Monroe. What? I don't remember them reading that. What? This is a latter day addition to the list, and is nothing more than a salacious joke. Even as a humorous coincidence, it fails the test, as Marilyn Monroe died well over a year before Kennedy's assassination. So what are we to make of all this? How do we account for all these coincidences, no matter how superficial they may be, and why do so many people find this list so compelling? The coincidences are easily explained as the simple product of mere chance. It's not difficult to define patterns and similarities between any two marginally related sets of data, and coincidences similar in number and kind can be, and have been, found between many different pairs of presidents. Our tendency to seek out patterns wherever we can stems from our desire to make sense of our world, to maintain a feeling that our universe is orderly and can be understood. In this specific case, two of our most beloved presidents were murdered for reasons that make little or no sense to many of us, and by finding patterns in their deaths, we also hope to find a larger cosmic something that seemingly provides some reassuring, if indefinite, rhyme or reason why these great men were prematurely snatched from our mortal sphere. Wow, that's quite an article right there. Snopes.com has long been engaged in the battle against misinformation, an effort we could not sustain without the support of our readers. If you'd like to learn more about how you can support, click here. Don't you ever support these guys. They're just going to take your money and do crack. Oh, man. All right, so I read that, Zach. There you go. Now he's continuing on. Both assassins were known by their three names, each consisting of 15 letters. When you write out 15 as a word, its gematria becomes 38 in the reduction method, having parallels to the words death, murder, and killing. Yeah, it's just an accident. I mean, it's completely insignificant that there's 15 letters in both of the assassins' names, and they weren't even called that by the majority of the population of that time. They were known by just Lee. They weren't called by their full names. Their full names have no significance to reality. There's no reason that was 15. I mean, it's also just a pure accident, pure chance. You can't make sense of this world, so why even try? There's no real significance between the number of letters. And just because killing has 38 in reduction, just like 15 does when you write it out, that's just it's still an accident. There's no significance behind that. Don't even attempt to try and figure out this language of gematria. It's all nonsense. 38, it's also as death. Death has 38 in ordinal gematria, and murder has 38 in reverse ordinal gematria, just like 15 has 38 in full reduction, and killing. I mean, that's just silly guys. Why are you figuring this out, Zach? There's no parallel there. It's completely insignificant. Right? Seriously. Recall Lincoln and Taylor died 15 years apart. The word assassin alone has gematria of 56, corresponding with 3, as in 3-part name. Again, Lincoln was killed at 56, a number corresponding to president as well. I should also mention that 3 has reverse ordinal gematria of 79, corresponding with the word murder. Zach, seriously, just because assassin has 56 gematria and single reduction, just like the number 3 does in ordinal, like a 3-part name, like the assassins are recorded in the history books. I mean, who cares what the history books have to say? What they're probably, we're forced to learn about in high school, what it's taught in all public indoctrination camps, public schools. Just because they're said in the history books by that 3-part name, there's no significance there. What really matters is what the people of that time, that we have no way to really understand, what they said, how they pronounced their names, and that guy had different, he was forging his identity all the time. That guy, his full name, that's 3 parts, that's recorded in the history books, has no significance. Like we hear George Washington, we never hear his middle name, right? You're so silly, Zach. And he just happened to die at 56. Lincoln died at 56. I mean, just like assassin is 56 and 3 is 56. I mean, that doesn't mean anything, Zach. That doesn't mean anything. I don't know where you're getting all this from. I should also mention that 3 has reverse ordinal gematria of 79, corresponding with the word murder. Does it really though, Zach? I mean, I guess you're right. But what is that? That's just an accident. I don't know how somehow, just happenstancely, these words connect. Right? I mean, it's not like this language of English was constructed in any fashion. There was just randomly, somehow people just randomly came up with, that's the alphabet. There was no design or intent behind it. Zach, when are you coming up with this? Assassins 56 in reduction, single reduction. There it is, President's also 56 in a single reduction. Civil Wars 56 in reverse reduction. 3 is 56 in ordinal, 3 is 79 in reverse ordinal. Like murder and like Lincoln died at 56. On a related note about assassin, the date of April 14th, 1865 was right. That's the right day. You know, we can't understand this world around us. What do you mean that was the right day, Zach? Assassin was 101 in ordinal. And then April 14th, 1865, 4 plus 14 plus 18 plus 65 is 101. I mean, that's just a coincidence, Zach. 4 plus 14 plus 1 plus 8 plus 6 plus 5 is 38. 4 plus 14 plus 65 is 83. Don't forget number equates to 38 in reverse reduction and 83 in reverse ordinal. So it's like 38 and 83. They're reflections of each other. Murder is that. I mean, Zach, I can't believe you're saying this. As for the 3-part name killers in the history books, they are common, and I can't wait to tell you about my favorite of all time, Dylan Storm Roof. So hoaxalicious. But for now, let us get back to the list of coincidences. According to Snopes, Booth ran from the theater and was caught in a tobacco shed. Oswald ran from a warehouse and was caught in a theater. Booth and Oswald were killed before their trials. Have you ever noticed how often it happens in mainstream reporting? The bad guy for the contrived story is often killed or commits suicide. Thus, no one can ever hear their side of the story, which leaves the long noses telling the tales, as they love to do. It's a tired pattern, and one of many that doesn't add up, pointing to the obvious deception that is, at least if you're not an American dreaming. Let us now focus on the failed assassination attempt of February 23, 1861, at the Willard Hotel, which came precisely 216 weeks before the Ford's Theater assassination, that was reported as being successful. In our 4 base ciphers, both buildings are perfect matches in gematria as follows. Willard Hotel is 58 in reduction, and 68 in reverse reduction, 139 in ordinal, and 185 in reverse ordinal. So, Ford's Theater is also 58 in reduction, and 68 in reverse reduction, and 139 in ordinal, and 185 in reverse ordinal. What? Willard Hotel and Ford's Theater? The same? What? Like what? Where the assassination attempt and the actual assassination took place? It has the same gematria? That's quite a coincidence, Zach. Maybe you found something, actually. Again, the word Freemasonry corresponds with the number 58 and 139. The word mathematics connects to 185. And the number 68 is often found around death, as we learned about with the death of the first president, William Henry Harrison. Let's not forget that Masonic has Jewish gematria of 223, not unlike the date February 23rd, where the 2 coinciding rituals began. Speaking of the Freemasons, who were once builders, a favorite motto of mine that no doubt came from them, and it is one to live by, is measure twice, cut once. And measure twice, cut once in ordinal gematria is 223, like Freemasonry is, or like Masonic is in Jewish gematria. Also worth mentioning about Lincoln is that he was shot 61 days after his 56th birthday, which was February 12th, the 43rd day of the year. It was a span of 43 days from March 4th, 43 days, the 43rd day of the year, the start of his second term, In 1865, 4 to 65 in reverse ordinal. So he was shot 61 days after his 56th birthday, which was February 12th, the 43rd day of the year. It was also a span of 43 days from March 4th, the start of his second term in 1865. As we know, the number 61 connects to time, and it also syncs with the year of the first assassination attempt, which was the year the Civil War began. White House also has gematria of 61, when S is counted for 10 in reduction. As for him being born on the 43rd day of the year, that is the number of the Civil War, which began in Charleston, where no one was killed in the first battle except for a lone horse. R.I.P. Civil War's 43 in reduction, Charleston's 43 in reduction, Killing's 43 in reverse reduction, Masonic's 43 in reverse reduction. There's no connection there. Don't even take this into account. Don't ascribe any significance to that. There's no significance there. Considering Lincoln is credited with freeing the slaves, it is no coincidence that the first black... It's no coincidence, really? Are you sure, Zach? I think that's a mistake. It's no coincidence that the first black U.S. president was number 44, but truly only the 43rd person to be president. If you recall, Obama was selected on November 4th, 2008, a date with numerology of 43, while representing the land of Lincoln, Illinois, and he gave his acceptance speech in Grant Park, having gematria of 43 as follows. Grant Park is 43 in reduction, and then November 4th, 2008, 11 plus 4 plus 20 plus 8 is also 43. He gave his acceptance speech at the same... That's just wild. As a reminder, Obama was born on August 4th, the 216th day of the year, in 1961, emphasis on 61, corresponding with how Lincoln died on a date with numerology of 84, 216 weeks after the first assassination attempt on his life in 1861. So Lincoln was shot 61 days after his birthday. The first assassination attempt was in 61, and Obama was born in 61? And for a second reminder, Abraham Lincoln has gematria of 84, and Abraham and Honest Abe equate to 44. Obama, which sums to 84 in Jewish gematria, is another puppet president who routinely puts down conspiracy theorists, especially those aimed at September 11th. Now you know why, and soon you'll uncover how Osama died 119 weeks after Obama took office, and why Michael Jackson died on the author of 1984's birthday, June 25th, also corresponding with the first black man in the White House. Civil War is 119 in reverse ordinal, All-Seeing Eye is 119 in ordinal, and Booth is 119 in Frank Baconis. For one last point on the death of Lincoln, it is reported he died at 7:22 a.m., April 15th, 1865. As we have learned, when you divide the number 22 by the number 7, the result is pi, having to do with cycles and circles. Let us now examine the gematria of United States of America, which Lincoln saved. In truth, the war was really about establishing the central bank and spreading slavery to all people of the nation, where we are no doubt slaves of debt dollars that are the invisible chains that bind us all, and collectively keep us on the American treadmill of financial necessity that pays much interests to the banker tyrants, who have profited from the time of the American Revolution onwards. As we decode, you should notice that United States of America sums to 314 in ALW Kabbalah, like pi, at 722 in the primes cipher. Remember also, both America and circle sum to 50 in gematria terms. This is how the ciphers relate. United States of America, 314 in ALW Kabbalah, and 722 in primes. Speaking of 722 and parallels between the assassinations of Lincoln and Kennedy, the alternate name for the Warren Commission was the President's Commission on the Assassination of President Kennedy, equating to 722 in ordinal gematria. Man, it's not like they purposefully contrived this at all. There's just no way that's purposeful. It's just by complete accident that it corresponds perfectly. Absolutely, Zach. I don't know how you're writing this 700. How you believe this, Zach? Over 700 pages in this book. I don't even understand how you get this. The President's Commission on the Assassination of President Kennedy. There's no way that they made this name purposefully to match 722 like United States of America in the prime cipher. Zach, you're just nuts. As always, truth seeker, there is always more, but I'll save those riddles for you to discover, because it is making those discoveries yourself that is the joy of this work. Let us now transition to the next president to bite the dust in office. Death of James Garfield, September 19th, 1881. The 20th president, Garfield, would die 26 years after Lincoln. Consider Lincoln also died on the date leaving 260 days left in the year, not too far off from 26. As you learned in Chapter 1, the number 26 represents kill, and it is the Masons in high places, murdering by the code, playing God over the unknowing masses. In terms of the gematria of the name Garfield, and him being the 20th president, the numbers were again fateful. You'll notice the number 20 connects to death, and Garfield has the gematria of 44, connecting to the word kill as well. You're so silly, Zach. Just because kill is 44 and Garfield is 44, I mean, that doesn't mean that he was supposed to be killed. You're so goofy. As for the date he died, September 19th, it can be written 199, not unlike 199, which is the 46th prime number. As we have learned, that number connects to sacrifice, murder, and kill. Garfield died on this date after being shot July 2nd, 1881, which was 79 days prior. As we have also learned and covered multiple times, the word murder has ordinal gematria of 79. I told you these people are repetitive. Also relevant, the name James Garfield equates to 79 in reverse reduction. As we learned, the Synagogue of Satan equates to 79 as well, and 223, which syncs with the name James in Satanic gematria equating to 223. How perfect it all is, eh? The date of him being shot and the year 81 were ripe for a ritual, which to the tyrants in charge is how they see murdering the innocents. Everything is a satanic ritual, and with what I am about to show you, everything you might have wondered about the 27 Club, or the number of dead rock stars at age 27, will be answered. First, notice July 2nd can be written 27, not unlike 27. The date of Garfield being shot also had a numerology of 27 to boot, as follows. February 7th, 1881, 2 plus 7 plus 1 plus 8 plus 8 plus 1 equals 27. Ritual equals 27 in reduction. Also 81 in ordinal and 81 in reverse ordinal. Just because it has 27, that don't mean jack, dude. Don't mean jack. Adding insult to injury, September 19th, the day of his passing, leaves 103 days left in the year, and 103 is the 27th prime number. It was also the day coming 61 days before his 50th birthday, similar to how Lincoln died 61 days after his 56th birthday. I mean, come on, he died 61 days before his 50th, and Lincoln died 61 days after his 56th. That's just a coincidence. Again, the number 61 represents time. That means Garfield passed at age 49, a number connecting to America, Washington, and more. You'll recall 227 is the 49th prime. And in these death rituals, they're all about cycles in numbers. If you count from his 49th birthday to the day he died, It was 43 weeks and 3 days after, which is something like 433, the 84th prime, another number you know well, tying in with the Jesuits and United States of America. You could also say he died on his 305th day of being his age, a number not far off from 35, corresponding with Catholic and other assassinations as covered. Speaking of 84, the assassin of Garfield was Charles Guiteau, a name in reverse reduction gematria equating to none other than the number 84. 84! The name Guiteau also sums to 84, as well as 42. Both numbers that equate with Jesuits, as well as Masonry and Freemasons, respectively. And don't lose track of the fact that divisors of 44 equates to 84, in light of the gematria of Garfield. 84 in ordinals, Guiteau. 42 in reverse reductions, Guiteau. I'm hoping with the release of this book, Wikipedia will take down their page about Jesuit assassination conspiracy theories, which dismisses the truth of what is taking place in this world. It shouldn't be a hard thing for them to do because they've taken down the 50 plus entries made by 50 plus different people for me who have tried to build a Wikipedia for my name and my work with the purpose of helping spread the knowledge and information. You see, Wikipedia isn't in the business of knowledge and information. They're in the business of controlling it, which is a very different thing. For a bit more information on the assassination, it happened at 9:30 a.m. on Garfield's 226th day of being 49 years old. Notice the time is a lot like the number 93, which connects to Saturn, the keeper of time, and having to do with death and judgments. If you write out 226, it equates to 93. Further, like the 226th day of him being 49 years old. Further, if you write out planet in Jewish gematria, it sums to 226. These are numbers that are very important in history, and they explain why the 93 World WTC bombing happened February 26th, or 226. 226 equals 93 in reduction. Planet is 226 in Jewish gematria, like the planet Saturn. As we're told, for another parallel between Garfield and the 93 WTC bombing, notice that 9:30 a.m. is the 570th minute of the day, and February 26th is the 57th day of the year. As we learned earlier, the number 57 connects to conspiracy and Scottish rites. No doubt, in both instances, they were conspiracy-driven matters, with the involvement of the Scottish Rite, who is large and in charge in the United States of America and elsewhere, including France, where the assassin Guiteau reportedly wanted a consultation position in Garfield's administration, being a man of French descent and a major supporter of Garfield on the campaign trail. Because he was overlooked, it made him venomous according to the history books, which resulted in a fatal shooting. The man who would replace Garfield, becoming the 21st president, was Chester Arthur. Before we get to what was special about him taking over, recall that Saturn has reduction gematria of 21, as 21 is the sixth triangular number, corresponding with Saturn being the sixth planet from the Sun. As for the gematria of Chester Arthur, a number of things pop, starting with the fact that his name sums to 79 in reverse reduction, similar to how Garfield died 79 days after being shot. 79! The name Chester Arthur also sums to 187 in reverse ordinal, the very special number to Washington, D.C., and to the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, as well as arsenic poisoning, which very well might have been how Garfield was finished off. Because 79 days after being shot, bro, I'm pretty sure you're not dying from being shot. As you'll learn in Murder, I gave a ride to a guy who works in a trauma hospital, and he said people die, if they're shot fatally, they're going to die in a few days. Not 79 days later. That's preposterous. As you'll learn in Murder by Numbers, many people have been killed with the number 187 signed into their death. Just wait until we get to the passing of Dr. Dre's son, a rapper who used to boast about committing 187s on records. Being a studio gangster might pay, but not enough. Because you're going to be murdered. You're going to be murdered. Chester Arthur is 187 reverse ordinal. Chester Arthur was 51 years old, the federal number when he became president. Just 16 days shy of his 52nd birthday. Another big number in Washington, D.C., as we know. Recall, when you write out 16, it sums to 33 in reduction, same as the name Chester, which is the other pertinent number to federal. Chester's 33 in reduction, federal is 33 in reduction. Later in life, he would die on November 18th, the 322nd day of the year, 44 days after his 57th birthday. As they say, what goes around comes around. I'll remind you again, if you serve this gang, in any capacity, you will be murdered by the code. All of you would be entertainers out there. All of you would be entertainers out there. I would choose wisely. Until the tyrants are out of power, you'll need to decide if leaving this earth on your own terms is of value to you. We have 4 minutes left, guys. We're on death of William McKinley on September 14th, 1901. 20 years after the 20th president died, the next man in the Oval Office to pass occurred. William McKinley was the 5th president to die in office, and the 25th president dying on a date with numerology of 25. Of course, the number 25 has a square root of 5. But more important than that, the word death also equates to 25. 25 in reverse reduction, it's death. On the date, September 14th, 1901, 9 plus 1 plus 4 plus 1 plus 9 plus 0 plus 1 equals 25. Such a coincidence. You could just pull any number out of the hat with death and kill. You can make any number with relating to synonyms for killing and murder and assassin, Zach. You can make any date work with that because you can just choose which numbers you want to add. I can make a video, make a book about this, Zach. Just make up the numbers, right? There's no statistics to that. And 9 minus 1 plus 4 minus 1. As for the name William McKinley, the gematria was fateful as follows. William is 34 in reduction. Murder is 34 in reduction. You're saying that's fateful gematria. William is 79 in ordinal. Murder is 79 in ordinal. No. McKinley's 38 in reduction. Related words, death, murder, killing, R.I.P. McKinley's 43 in reverse reduction. Killing's 43 in reverse reduction. In addition to the gematria of 43 for McKinley, he died on a date with numerology of 43, and it was precisely 43 days before Teddy Roosevelt's 43rd birthday, October 27th. Because 9 plus 14 plus 19 plus 1 is 43. R.I.P. is 43 in ordinal. McKinley was shot September 6th, 1901, on his 221st day of being 58 years old, in the Temple of Music. Notice how Temple of Music equates to the number 58. It also equates to 68 in reverse reduction. Both numbers that should be familiar. Temple of Music's 58 in reduction. Recall the number 221 is connected to the Bavarian Illuminati, and the number 58 represents Freemasonry, as well as Washington, among other things. It reminds a bit of Donald J. Trump, 68 in reverse reduction, being sworn in at the 58th U.S. inauguration on his 221st day of being 70 years old, and that Trump has reduction gematria of 25. And see how that's in italicized? What did I mention at the beginning of this? I think he's going to talk about Trump. So Trump has reduction gematria of 25, huh? What was with 25? It's with death and reverse reduction? McKinley would die September 14th, which was 228 days after his 58th birthday. January 29th, or on his 229th day of being the age. With regards to the number 228, it represents the United States of America in ordinal gematria as well as death in Sumerian gematria. As for 229, it is the 50th prime number, connecting to America and a circle. Death is 228 in Sumerian. And we're at the hour. Alright, y'all. Alright, y'all. Hope you learned some things like I have been doing. Get the book, Gematria Effect News and Gematria Effect Sports. Letters and Numbers is the book. I'll try and put it in the description. We'll be back for more